When you're ready.
Thank you very much. May it please the court. Kevin Gilbert for Los Angeles Police Officer, Defendant, and Appellant Officer Agdeppa. We would respectfully request that 2 minutes be reserved for rebuttal.
Go right ahead, and you may reserve the time if you could just keep an eye on the clock, please.
Thank you very much. The issue presented is whether or not Officer Agdeppa is entitled to qualified immunity. It is a narrow issue, and we believe the trial court erred on at least 2 grounds. As the court is aware, the issue of qualified immunity is to be defined very clearly based upon established law. And in this case, the trial court committed an error which is directly addressed by the Supreme Court, actually, in defining it at a very high level. Furthermore, the trial court erred in deciding that there was a disputed issue of material fact that precluded summary judgment. Now, beginning with the first issue, about the qualified immunity. As this court is aware, the Supreme Court has recently addressed this through many published decisions. Most recently was Kiesla, for example. In Kiesla, the Supreme Court cautioned the Ninth Circuit in particular, and trial courts, to avoid defining the clearly established prong at a high level of generality. In fact, the Supreme Court specifically addressed the Dorsey case, which was a 1985 case where the Ninth Circuit had addressed that it's generally a principle that a person is able to be free from excessive force or lethal force if it's not otherwise appropriate. Despite the Supreme Court guidance there, and then again repeated in Sheehan, the trial court simply echoed the comments of Dorsey, generally prohibits the use of excessive force in situations such as
Counsel,
this.
if we agree with you about that, then I'm interested in the more specific holding here, the sub-argument, if you will, which has to do with our case law requiring that when it is justified, when an officer is justified in using deadly force, lethal force, that if practicable, he or she must first give warning. As a separate argument, a much more specific holding than the case law that you just, I think, very correctly identified. Could you speak to that, to the failure to warn?
Absolutely, but the failure to warn goes to the reasonableness of the use of force, not to the qualified immunity prong. As the court is aware, a failure to warn is not necessarily actionable, and that goes to the reasonableness of the use of force and whether there's a civil rights
I'm not sure I
violation.
agree with you about either of those propositions.
Well, Your Honor, the Supreme Court and the Ninth Circuit established precedent has confirmed that a warning is required where feasible.
I just said that, counsel. I understand that. So that's what I'm asking you to focus upon. And the word we used was practicable. I don't think it's different than feasible. So in this case, we have it's an unusual case. So my hypothetical asks you to assume, I think you're correct for purposes of my hypothetical, that part of the analysis here in the trial court defined the use of force part of the discussion at too high a level of generality. But if we could focus on the more specific requirement in our case law, that where the circumstances justify the use of lethal force, that a warning must be given where practicable. Why isn't that a problem in this case?
Because in this case, the question is, qualified immunity addresses whether or not every reasonable officer would have understood that in that instance, that his actions were wrongful.
I know that, counsel. So why isn't that a problem here? Since we'd said it in several cases, we'd several times said prior to the use of lethal force, if practicable, and it's not always practicable, if practicable, the warning has to be given. And so really, if I could focus you on that, I'm struggling with this because there's a warning was given. And the declaration of your client is very unique on that point. He said, I said words to the effect of stop. And, we've scoured this record, and there's an audio recording, although at this point, not a video recording, right? On the audio, we can hear somebody say, sounds like stop. So what about this very specific point?
There is evidence in the record that Officer Agdeppa yelled something. He does not recall specifically what he yelled.
I know.
At that moment, it's immediately after he's been struck in the face and disoriented. At that point, Officer Rodriguez is laying on the floor with an assailant who's over 6 feet tall, over 300 pounds,
Yes.
straddling her, beating her, holding her taser against her face.
All of that we know.
And at that point, Officer Agdeppa yells something. He believed he gave a verbal warning. The case law does not necessarily require a verbal warning every time. He gave as much warning as he could when he regained his wits, and he sees what's going on in front of him. He sees the assailant over her, pummeling her, trying to kill her.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be difficult, counsel, but you're telling us the facts that we know, and I think they're well stated, they're really well articulated in the record. So I understand that.
I'm sorry that I don't understand.
That's okay. It's just that I'm not trying to make it difficult, but it is a really a sliver of a question. The district court found that a jury could decide, right, that there's a question of fact about whether the required warning was given here. And maybe the jury could decide that there's a question of fact about whether it was really possible to give the warning. That's what I'm trying to focus on. Is that wrong?
And I believe it is. I don't believe that established precedent specifically requires a warning. It's when practical, as the court addressed.
So is your position, again, to be specific, is your position that a reasonable jury could only find that it was not possible to give a warning? Is that your position?
I believe that it goes to the issue of qualified immunity, Your Honor. And I believe the jury could not find that it was unreasonable to not give a warning if one was not given. I believe the factual record is that one was given. I believe that a jury could not find to the contrary based on the facts that are undisputed, as well as on the case law. And then to go to the third component, I believe that under qualified immunity, it has to be undisputed that the officer believed his actions were wrongful. And this was addressed in Isavea. Isavea had almost identical facts. The officer was on the bed, had been knocked on the verge of being
And that goes back to the undisputed part of the discussion today. That's not a failure to warn case, right? So just if I can, and then I'm going to get out of your way. But it sounds like you think that the district court was incorrect when she decided that a jury could decide that there's a dispute about whether a warning was given. Is that right?
Yes.
And you think there's a dispute of fact about whether a warning was required to be given?
I think that's a dispute of law, not fact. But I agree with that, yes.
And you think that a reasonable officer wouldn't have known, is that right? That a warning is required if it's practicable?
In this situation.
Okay, help me out with that one.
Yes.
When you say in this situation, I was just reciting or trying to recite a legal principle. And now you're telling me in this situation, which strikes me as a position that you think that factually that the warning was not required. And I'm asking a different question. That's why we're missing, I think.
Okay, so I'm sorry. Tell me again the question you're asking.
Is it your position that a reasonable officer would not have known that if practicable, he needed to give a warning that he was going to use lethal force?
Yes.
Why?
Because in this situation, you've got the rapidly evolving situation.
But that's a factual argument. I'm asking, do you think that and which I appreciate, and you've articulated very well in your briefing and here today, is it your position that a reasonable officer would not have understood this legal ruling? That if possible, he's got to give the warning?
And where I'm struggling, Your Honor, is
Okay.
I don't know that I necessarily have the same understanding of the law as you do. And so forgive me. My understanding of the law is that it's where practical. And so that comes down to a factual question of, is it practical? And it doesn't need to be given in every situation. And that based upon the factual record here, you have warnings of we're going to tase you, we're going to use force.
You've answered my question. Thank you.
Is your argument that the holding that you've been discussing, which is a warning must be given before deadly force is employed whenever practicable, is at too high a level of generality, and that the case law doesn't develop when it is and when it is not practicable?
Absolutely, Your Honor. Because
that's the unclarity in the case law that you're pointing to in order to get qualified immunity on this lethal force warning issue?
absolutely. And
How could it be more specific than us saying, before you resort to lethal force, you have to give a warning that you're going to do that if the circumstances allow?
Your Honor, as the Supreme Court has stated multiple times, under qualified immunity, it must be clear to every reasonable officer.
How would a
not any
reasonable officer not, what's vague about that ruling? Or about that
Because-
rule of law?
What happens if somebody pulls a gun instantly?
That's a different,
Are you able to
that's the
stop?
factual point. And I'm absolutely in agreement with you on that point. Then there's going to be a million shades of gray in there, right? About whether it was practical or not, but we're just not finders of fact. My question was, and maybe you've answered it.
Well, the question, Your Honor, for me is, where are the shades of gray? Where do you draw the line? At what point do you say to the officer, you can act immediately to save your life? At what point do you say, this is where it's
Absolutely, those
clear?
are all factual distinctions. I'm asking you about whether officers would understand the legal ruling, that if I can give a warning, Before using lethal force, I'm required to do so.
I believe every officer would understand generally that where practical, where feasible, a warning can and should be given and must be given.
So your argument is inherently on the factual side.
My argument is under the law, it's not clear where practical comes into play.
Okay.
So where do you draw that line? Is it, if I come up behind an officer with a weapon, do they have to step aside and say, hey, time out, I'm going to use force if you don't set that down, or can they defend themselves immediately? The law under the use of lethal force is if there's an imminent threat, the officer can defend themselves for the life of another.
I know that,
instantly.
we know that, and I appreciate that. I really do. I don't want to take up more of your time on this because I'm not sure you can answer my question any more definitively than you already have, and I appreciate it.
And I appreciate it. The problem is these laws there's not clearly defined. You have the clearly defined under the imminent use of force, and it's been addressed in detail. The where feasible aspect or where practical has not been. So in this case, you have the court denying it at a high